Top Democrats are asking Tulsi Gabbard to explain why she attended an FBI raid in Fulton County when agents seized ballots related to President Trump's 2020 election defeat. Here's what the president said when asked to explain.
Mr. President, what was Tulsi Gabbard doing at an election center in Georgia today?
She's working very hard on trying to keep the election safe, and she's done a very good job. And they, as you know, they got into the votes. You got a signed judge's order in Georgia, and you're going to see some interesting things happening. They've been trying to get there for a long time.
Joining me now is our friend, author and psychologist Mary Trump, also President Trump's niece. She hosts the Mary Trump Show podcast, and she's written books about how Trump's childhood shaped his first presidency. Welcome, Mary. Can you tell me what your uncle means by trying to keep the election safe, and what is he suggesting is yet to come?
I think what he means is that he is desperate to overturn the results of the 2020 election. And he's going to use all of the means at his disposal, which are not inconsiderable. In fact, Tulsi Gabbard, last I checked, is not in the business of checking on election integrity or security. I think that the bigger mission here for Donald is to undermine the American people's faith in free and fair elections. This is something he's been engaged in for years now. And again, now he has a lot more power in order to do that. It's a very worrisome sign. Tulsi Gabbard is the director of national intelligence. So unless they suspect some foreign interference that didn't benefit Donald in 2020, she has no business being there. And I think the American people do deserve answers about that.
But 2020 is 6 years ago. Why is Trump unable to accept his defeat after many investigations and rulings prove the election results were correct? Why can't he let it go?
He can't let anything go that paints him as a loser. And even though he's back in the Oval Office, even though he has more money now because of the corruption in the Trump regime, it's never enough. And I've written about this, and it's fascinating to me how it continues to be true, but it's becoming increasingly true. The more power he gets, the more wealth he amasses, the more he looks back to engage in revisionist history in order to convince himself and everybody around him that he actually won everything. So I think it's pretty simple, actually. Donald is a deeply insecure person. And in my family, being a loser was literally the worst thing you could possibly be. It was deserving of humiliation and worse. So he is still trying to rewrite that narrative to protect his fragile ego.
So, as you know, this week, he did actually file a lawsuit against the IRS, and it seeks a $10 billion taxpayer-financed payout over the leaking of his tax returns some years back. And last October, he also demanded $230 million from the Justice Department as compensation for the federal criminal investigations that he faced after losing in 2020. What's this really about? I mean, you mentioned money. Is that what it's all about?
Yes, it is indeed. Because Donald, it's never, as I said, it is never enough, because going back for decades, money is the only thing that gives people in my family a sense of self-worth. So the more you're worth financially, the more you're worth as a human being. And he has a very, very deep void that he's trying desperately to fill. And money is his preferred way to do that. Of course, it's not going to work, because we see these lawsuits becoming increasingly frequent, and the numbers are getting bigger and bigger. And he doesn't let anything go ever, even if he has indeed won, in a sense. Like, I defy him to prove what his damages are. He's back in the White House. He's making money hand over fist. And I think there are cases in which the lawsuit is vengeful. It's to get retribution. I think Letitia James Comey, but sometimes it's a mechanism to simply to enrich himself in a very easy way. He has a track record here suing media corporations, for example, and despite the fact that they're frivolous, they settle to his benefit. So he's not going to stop. I mean, he's suing me for $100 million. So, and I think that he understands now that there are bigger fish to fry.
Yeah. I mean, but really taxpayers would be the ones paying these out, which is extraordinary, whatever Americans feel about that. So with all the developments in Minnesota, Governor Tim Walz found himself having to talk to the White House officials as well as the president in the last week. And here's some of what he said about those talks. Let's watch.
This is what's so hard to deal with this president. You have to know the psychology of how to do it. Look, I know who I'm dealing with, and I know the reason that he was calling me was he needed something from us. He needed it not because this is a horrific situation of a violation of human rights, the potential murder of Minnesotans, an assault on our state that is unprecedented, I think, in American history. The reason he was calling was his poll numbers dropped and it looked bad on TV.
Do you agree there's a psychology involved in talking to the president? And if so, what advice would you give?
Yeah, I agree with Governor Walz completely. Donald is not the least bit concerned about the violence that's being perpetrated. In fact, he's ordering it to be perpetrated. His goal here is to create circumstances in American cities that either lead to Americans staying home and keeping silent, or to clashes like we've seen in Minnesota that can give him the opportunity to invoke the Insurrection Act or declare martial law. I think that the time of appeasement is over. We've seen this play out on the world stage as well. People are finally starting to realize that the worst thing to do is to capitulate to Donald, because he sees that as an opportunity to try to get more. People need to stand up and stop playing ball with him and draw a line in the sand. I think that negotiating with an administration that never operates in good faith is a very bad strategy. And again, it only leads to a situation in which he continues to have the upper hand.
Mary, as you look ahead, what are your gravest concerns about this administration relative to the country?
My gravest concern is that there is nobody in a position to do anything about it who will try at least to slow this down. What we've seen since January 1st has been, on the one hand, not surprising, but just a shockingly quick decline of America, both domestically and internationally. So we're not just looking at a situation in which American institutions continue to be dismantled. We're not just looking at a situation in which essentially a Gestapo is being unleashed on the American people. We're looking at the possibility that the Trump regime is going to unravel the post-World War II order. And that is going to be extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible, to come back from.